Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Hello, hello. Hate to pull you away from your, there's such a happy buzz in this room. It's so great. It's a wonderful thing to hear. And it's a wonderful that you're here to join with us today as we focus on our Restorative Justice Juvenile Diversion Program. And you'll soon learn what a powerful process this is that promotes accountability and growth. Not only just growth in the youth and the families that go through this, but for all of us, even the CADY and our volunteers. It's a beautiful thing to see, very powerful. So you'll be hearing from our youth, parents, program volunteers, and even from Dr. Clarissa Palmer. She's the director of the Helping Cause Pet Assisted Therapy Program, and we use that program. We have been for several years now to really reach the kids that are disconnected, isolated, and really struggling and suffering from ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And so I always say that the youth that are referred to our program, they're the lucky ones, because we see a lot of kids that have early onset of substance misuse and lack connections or need services. And so for so many of them, we're able to connect them for the very first time to these needs, and also to long-term positive healthy relationships in the community, whether it be with adults, ongoing mentors, or with some pro-social activities. And that's really critical, we know, for healthy development, whether it's youth or young adults for that matter. We also have Tim Tyler with us today. Tim was our Restorative Justice Director for over a decade, and I always refer to him as the kid whisperer. And so he's still got it going on, and is dedicated to the cause, clearly, being here today. And also Jim Kemmerer, one of our former coordinators, he and Tim had the commonality of both being retired school principals. And Jim is having surgery today, or he would be here because he still volunteers with our program. And so at this point, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to our current program coordinator, and she's phenomenal. Another kid whisperer comes to us with amazing credentials, including mental health credentials, which, as we all know, in this day and age, there's the epidemic of not only substance misuse, but also with mental health with our kids. We have a crisis going on across the country. Our own region is no different. So to have somebody as highly credentialed as Allison Pelletier is a real gift. So, you can go ahead.
Hello. So I am Allison Pelletier. I'm a Restorative Justice Coordinator with CADY. I have been with CADY for not quite a year yet. We're coming up on a year in September. I am a transplant into your community. So prior, just a quick introduction, I come from, I was on the seacoast of New Hampshire. Prior to working with CADY, I was working in Lawrence Public Schools in Massachusetts. If anyone is familiar with Lawrence and some of the issues that they face, I was working in their public school. The high school has about 4,000 students. It is enormous. Because Lawrence has been dubbed the heroin capital of the world, they have a lot of issues going on there. So I was actually working as a school counselor in an alternative high school. It was a trauma-informed high school called RISE. Their mission was to help students who, for legal reasons, could not be in the public high school. So I was working with students who were involved in some gang violence, who were being charged with some drug trafficking, gun trafficking charges, things of that nature. I loved that job. It was great. The kids were wonderful. My coworkers were wonderful. But after a while, it was exhausting. And my husband and I love to ski. We love to hike. We love Plymouth. So we thought, let's move. And then it just so happened that CADY was looking for a restorative justice coordinator, and here I am. So that's all about me. I'm really excited that everyone is here today. This lunch and learn has been in the works for a long time, so I'm glad that it's finally come to fruition. So today we'll talk about CADY's program, what referrals look like, who is eligible for the program, the basics of the program. We'll talk about what restorative justice is. I know many of you already know that. We'll just touch upon some of those basic principles. We have some really wonderful guest speakers, and then we'll close out with a Q&A panel for current restorative justice panel members. So just a quick brief history of CADY's restorative justice program. In your packets, there is like a notepad should you want to take notes. So in 2006, there was a lack of alternative sentencing. The Pennybaker Youth and Family Services had closed. And so because of that, there was this gap in services. So CADY was able to pilot a restorative justice program in conjunction with a local faith-based organization. We had support from the local community, whether JPPOs, police departments, the community at large. So that is really how the program began. We are a court-approved juvenile diversion program. We're accredited through the state of New Hampshire. We belong to the New Hampshire Juvenile Court Diversion Network. And really the goal of the program, the purpose of the program is to make amends. It's healing. And so the reparative process, we'll walk through what that actually looks like. But the goal is to promote youth resiliency. I provide a lot of strength-based education. We'll talk about that too. Typically there's some form of restitution that comes out of this program, apology letters or letters of appreciation, and then ultimately there's some community service. CADY does have an 85% success rate. It is one of the highest success rates in the state of New Hampshire, something that we are really proud of. So just more broadly speaking, this is kind of the breakdown of what restorative justice looks like. It is a voluntary process. So when a referral comes to me, we talk about what restorative justice is. We talk about what it would look like, the hoops that you're going to have to jump through. And if they are unwilling to do that, then maybe this is not the right process for them. Most of the time, you do want to move forward. But because it's voluntary, it's voluntary for everybody. That includes the harmed party. So we'll talk a little bit more about what a restorative panel would look like, but typically we want all stakeholders at the table. We try really hard to encourage that, but again, it is voluntary with that focus though on repairing harm, giving agency to the youth and to the harmed party to make amends and come to an understanding. There are 5 principles to restorative justice, easy to remember because they all start with R. So relationship, respect, responsibility, repair, and then ultimately reintegration. And so this graphic might be a little bit challenging to see here, but really, again, we try to invite full participation for all stakeholders to be a part of the process. And the focus is on healing. It's on, repairing the damage that has been done, whether that's physical damage, emotional damage, right? There's trust that's been broken there, and so the reparative process is working towards repairing that harm. It is the crux of the whole program is that the youth takes accountability, that they are going to take full responsibility for what happened. They're going to work hard to make amends. You'll see in a later slide what the agreement actually looks like. I'll show you an example of one that we just used like a month ago. And so there are, again, hoops to kind of jump through, but the idea is once they can repair the harm, we kind of rebuild that trust in our community, and then they can reintegrate. And hopefully they reintegrate with a sense of belonging into their community. So there is this misconception that we sometimes hear, and that is restorative justice is soft on crime. We sit around a table and we talk about our feelings and our thoughts all the time, and so this is a soft way to handle it. That's a misconception. I believe that restorative justice really is an active process. It's active versus passive. Going to court can be a pretty passive process for someone. Whereas, like I said, the youth come through our program, they do jump through hoops. We'll walk through what those hoops are. But really, we are seeking to hold offenders directly accountable for their actions. We are also giving the opportunity to the harmed party to participate. And so when someone goes through the court system, the harmed party doesn't always get to have that sense of closure or that sense of healing or have their voice heard, so that we are providing that option for them as well. The other thing that we will talk about is we address some of the potential underlying causes. So when a youth signs up to be a part of our program, there are a lot of surveys, there are a lot of assessments, there are a lot of questionnaires that they answer, and that is really for me to conduct needs assessment, right? It's for me to figure out, are there gaps in services? Do you need referrals? How can we close the gaps or provide the education or the support that maybe a family needs? And so while it might not necessarily be the underlying cause of crime, it certainly can be helpful, and the idea is that it reduces that recidivism rate. And ultimately, like I said, it allows for healing, reconciliation between harmed parties and the offender. When appropriate, there's an asterisk to that. Sometimes harmed parties say, absolutely not, no thank you, and that's okay, right? That's their choice. So again, we have a lot of goals. This is now specific to our program. We'll walk through what each one of these looks like. But the last point is promoting resiliency in youth. Deb just talked about it briefly. We'll talk about it more in depth coming up. But adverse childhood experiences, there's a lot of science behind this now. And so we'll look into how can we promote resiliency in youth. And again, the idea is reducing that recidivism rate, because if youth can understand maybe some of the science that's going on, or maybe some of the contributing factors to behavior, once they learn it, hopefully they feel empowered and more motivated to be a contributing member of their community. So again, unlike going to court, the harmed party does not necessarily have the opportunity to voice their side. And so this can be a really healing process for a harmed party. We've had some phenomenal panels where the harmed party has been present. They've been able to talk about ripples of harm and unintended harm that the offender probably hasn't even thought of. And so that does provide a very unique perspective, and I think it allows the youth to feel not necessarily guilt and shame, right, because that's not what restorative justice is about, but it does allow them the opportunity to see that their actions have caused way more than they even think of in the moment. So having someone there, I always, again, it is voluntary, but I do really encourage harmed parties to be present, because that can be the most powerful. Anyone who has sat in on the panel, we do have some panel members here today, can vouch that that can be like the most powerful piece of a panel. So the other part of our program, and the part that I take probably the most seriously, is addressing the issue of youth having a lack of attachment to a caring adult, to a responsible adult in their life, a positive role model. Sometimes we see youth come in and they don't have any connections to their community, and if you don't have any connection to your community, it's easier to commit crime in your community, right? So if you take pride in your community, if you have, you're involved in clubs and sports or some kind of organization, or you have people in your town that you feel connected to, it's much less likely to happen. We'll look into the actual statistics of that, but this is a part of my job where I get to have a little bit of fun, because when we do community service, I try to find mentors that will continue a relationship with the youth even long after their time in our program is over. So that can be really powerful and super it's a two-way partnership, because I think the mentor gets something out of it too. And I do want to give a shout out to Tina Schumacher. I don't put her on the spot, but she has been phenomenal. She's worked with youth and has really taken them. They finished our program and yet they're still working together. So it's been a really great partnership. So we've gone through all of these. These are our objectives, really. Ideally, we're promoting a lasting behavior change. So it's not just they come to our program, they do what they have to do, and then they bye, see you later. The idea is that they're really getting something out of it, and by repairing harm to the community, hopefully dropping those recidivism rates, we're saving money in the future, reducing costs in our community. We're trying to help both the offender, but also the harm party not feel so isolated. Sometimes that can happen. And ultimately, we're learning the consequences of it. There are natural consequences to our behavior and to our choices. And so finding that out now, while you're under the age of 18, is going to be really important, because pretty soon you're going to be over the age of 18. So giving them a taste of that and what a natural consequence to an action looks like, and then being able to take responsibility for it, take ownership of it. Hopefully, the goal is that lasting behavior change. So who is eligible for our program? 12 to 18 is what we say. But there's an asterisk at the bottom, because I do consider every referral, every case on a case-by-case basis. Another shout out to Officer Jill Bonin, because she calls all the time and says, hey, I think I have something, what do you think? Yes, love it. So any referral sources out there, if you have a question about eligibility, you're not sure if it's the right fit, just give me a call and we can talk about it. Youth between 12 and 18, normally we're seeing like 16, 17, 18. 18 if they're still in high school, right? They're a senior in high school, they turn 18. Typically, we're looking at 12 being the youngest, but we have had 11-year-olds, we had 10-year-olds in the program, so we can be pretty flexible. We are looking for youth who do not currently pose a safety risk to themselves or others. That would just mean that they would probably need additional services. So you can certainly give me a call. We can figure out a referral, and we can find another agency. We can find some support services. We are also looking for youth and guardians who are willing to make an active commitment to the process. Because restorative justice is so focused on taking accountability, taking responsibility, if a youth is unwilling to do so, the process is going to be really challenging and probably unsuccessful, because that is really what it's all about, is that accountability piece. Having guardians who buy into that is really important. Guardians who are willing to provide transportation is really important, especially if the youth is under the age of 16 and does not have a license. Because they're going to need to go to and from community service. I meet with youth once a week the first month, and then we move to every other week for the remaining time in the program. So there are a lot of meetings. I have been fortunate enough to have some pretty good relationships with counseling departments in the schools that we serve, who have offered up their office for me to meet with kids too. So if transportation is an issue, we can certainly skirt around that. But having youth and guardians who are willing to make an active effort is really awesome. The program is free. So that's another thing. It used to be on a sliding fee scale, it's not anymore. So it is a totally free program that is to boost equity, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. Equitable access to services, so that a kiddo in Ashland and a kiddo in Plymouth, they both don't maybe get caught shoplifting, and one goes to court and one comes to our program, and that's not equitable. So to make sure that everyone has equitable access to this program is something that's really important. If the fee was a barrier, it's gone now. So that's something else to consider when looking for referring. So this is just like a basic rundown of how the referral process works. Police officers, schools, parents can call us, right? We can take referrals from a lot of different sources. If they come to us directly, like when Jill Bonin gives me a call and says, I have someone for you, I send her the referral form, she sends it back to me, that's it, that's all it takes. It's a very simple process. The other way that can happen is if school counselors or principals, assistant principals, administrators of any kind do the same thing. I can just send them a form, they can reach out to me. Or if a case goes to court and then the court kicks it to our program too. So there are multiple different ways that they can come to us. There are these 3 options, right? So the one we just talked to is most common. That's how I get the referrals, is that I just get a direct referral from a police officer. And so once that happens, I meet with the youth, we go over the program. If they agree to it and they think it's a good fit, awesome, we'll keep moving forward. If they say not for me, it goes back to the referring agency and they work to the channels that they need to work through. If the youth successfully goes through the program and does what they need to do, awesome, I send a certificate of completion to the referring agency. If they don't, I still let the referring agency know, then they do what they need to do. So it can be a very straightforward process. This is typically how it works. So when the juvenile commits an offense, right, they get referred to me in some way. And then I meet with the youth and the parents. We talk about the program. We make sure that everything is good. They agree to it. As soon as they agree to it, I reach out to the harmed party. I let them know that there will be a youth completing the program. Here's what it would look like. I would love for you to be a part of this process. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. But regardless, they do get notified so that they know that the youth is coming through our program. I continue to meet with the youth and their guardian. Then we hold our reparative panel. And the reparative panel will walk through more what that even means. But like I said, we ask the harmed party to come. If they don't want to come, they can put something in writing. They could send an advocate in their place. They could just send an email that says, hey, say this at the panel. That's fine too. We hold the panel, and during that time, we create the reparative agreement. And so that is basically all the things that the youth needs to do to complete the program. If they complete the program, awesome. If they don't complete the program, I let the referring agency know. So that's typically how it goes down. This is what that referral form looks like. So it's super simple. It's on 1 page, just asking some quick questions, asking about what happened, what the charges were. If they are being, at the bottom here, it says, are they being referred to our program with any other youth? And I just like to know that because I want to have separate panel members. I want to have separate community service options. I don't want there to be any conflicts of interest or any overlap in that way. And just giving like the basic information so that way I know when I call home who I'm talking to, if there's any other like police involvement, just so I have some background knowledge. So I'm not just calling up and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So once we get the referral and they're in the program, before we have the actual panel, I meet with the youth 3 to 4, normally 4 times before actually holding the panel. And that's because we have a lot of things to do. So these are some of the next steps. There's a lot of paperwork involved at first, that very first meeting that we have. A lot of releases, so I can talk to anyone, whether it's a school, whether it's an outside mental health counselor, any other stakeholders where I might need to talk to somebody else. Once we do that, I'm trying to get to know them as quickly and as well as possible. So I'm trying to build rapport because then we put them through a lot of screenings and questionnaires, and I want them to be as honest as possible. So they want to trust me, they want to know who I am before I start asking them some questions. CADY does provide, because we are communities for alcohol and drug-free youth, so we do provide that pre-program survey and a post-program survey. On that survey, we do ask a lot of questions about alcohol and drug use, both their use and their perceptions of use, and their opinions about use. So those are 2 things that we do at the beginning and at the end. We'll look at some of that data at the end of this presentation. But we also do social determinants of health, the ACEs questionnaire, the ESPER. I'll show you what all of those look like. And then we start, potentially based on answers that they provide on these screenings, I then would provide educational intervention, depending on what they might need. I will talk specifically about Prime for Life. There is a handout of Prime for Life in the packet at your table. If you have, I'll give you a brief overview, but if you wanted to read more about it, it's in there. And that is the program that CADY uses. So the first thing that we do is a social determinants of health screening form. This goes to guardians. So during that intake, we are asking questions like, in the last 12 months, did you ever eat less than you felt you should because there wasn't enough money for food? So this is a way for us to start gauging if there are some referrals that we need to make, or if there are some services we can help a family get. We assist with getting whatever resources they need if they feel comfortable with us doing that. We ask about housing, we ask about medical care, and mental health care as well. So this is for the parents to fill out, just so that we know if there's anything that we can do to help. This next screening is through the New Hampshire Juvenile Court Diversion Network, so all juvenile diversion programs use this screening. This is a screening to brief intervention, we call it the ESPERT. And this is a screener that measures substance misuse, general mental health, and suicidal ideation. And so based on these different questions, there are certain benchmarks. So when I score them, if we hit a certain point, specifically around suicidal ideation and substance use, then there are things that I need to do right away, right? So whether that's calling 911 because we need to get some services here immediately, or putting them through some type of education program like a Prime for Life. So what is Prime for Life? So in 2019, the New Hampshire Liquor Enforcement contacted CADY. They said that there was kind of this gap. They were looking for services for a diversion program, primarily for young adults, for that first time low-level alcohol offense. And so we started partnering. PRI is the company that has developed Prime for Life. They've taken over 200 research studies and condensed them into information that we can provide people. It is about high-risk decision making when it comes to substance use, alcohol, and drug use. So evidence-based prevention, intervention, and pre-treatment program. This is specifically for those young adults. However, the kids in restorative justice, I will give them not necessarily the full 8-hour program because that would be crazy, but I do kind of pick and choose parts of the program that they would really benefit from. And so we have had over 100 participants successfully complete the program. Brittany and I taught a class just yesterday. So we do 2 4-hour sessions, giving the Prime for Life curriculum, and that is kind of separate. So should anyone want to make a referral for Prime for Life, that handout in there will show you how to do that. But as far as the restorative justice program is concerned, like I said, I kind of pick and choose from this curriculum. It is all about protecting what we value. So the youth identify what they value most, and then what high-risk choices are they making that's jeopardizing what they value. So the next questionnaire that we do is newer, within the last 2 years. The ACE survey or ACE questionnaire has been added. I'm sure most of you are familiar with adverse childhood experiences and the study that it came out of Kaiser Permanente in the CDC in California specifically. There's like a 30-year longitudinal study. It looked at adverse childhood experiences and the correlation between ACEs and negative health outcomes in the future, right? They were able to narrow it down to 10 childhood traumas that were most commonly reported. Why is this important for restorative justice? We'll get there. So this is asking some pretty significant stuff, and I typically wait for this to be the last questionnaire that I offer because I want there to be a lot of trust. I want there to be honesty, right? That's the only way that I can really be super helpful. I will say, by the time that we get to this, I feel pretty confident that most of the kids are being honest. It does ask questions. It ranges from domestic violence in the home, suicide attempts, childhood sexual abuse, talks about if anyone has ever attempted suicide or has been in prison. So it is heavy. It's hard to talk about sometimes. But the conversations that I'm getting with the youth after they complete this are really awesome. And it does allow me to make referrals if needed. So I said, why is this important to restorative justice? if you'll indulge me for just a moment, because I do love brain science, and I know this is maybe not what we were expecting for today, but this is a picture of the brain, right? And there are 3 sections that we're going to talk about today. And the first one is the amygdala. A lot of you probably know this already, but it is about an almond-sized piece of your brain back here. It is in charge of, it's your fear response. So it's part of your reptilian brain. It's been around for a very long time. It's the part of the brain that cavemen and women, when they saw a saber-toothed tiger, were like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. So fight, flight, freeze, it's all happening in that amygdala. The other piece we're going to talk about is the hippocampus. The hippocampus stores memory. That also allows you to remember things that you've learned, but also just memories in general get stored in that hippocampus. And the last piece is the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is helping us make good choices. It's helping with our executive functioning skills. And these all work together in the limbic system. And our limbic system is a lot of interconnected, very complicated, complex circuits, wiring in our brain. And what ends up happening, though, is with adverse childhood experiences, specifically toxic stress, which is different than the stress I felt this morning. And I was like, oh, I have to talk in front of people today. That is like healthy stress, that's okay. Toxic stress is different, right? So toxic stress really is that prolonged activation of your stress response. So the prolonged activation of that amygdala that's constantly going, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. It might look like hypervigilance. It would look like a kid who's constantly on high alert, right? When your amygdala is firing like that, it actually is growing in size. And when it grows in size, it decreases the size and impairs the functioning of the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. There's a lot of research on this, so if you want it, let me know, I'll send it your way. But this can look like symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it can also pose a greater risk for young people to have some learning and behavioral challenges. It can impair decision making. Because we've all heard like children are like sponges, right? There are a lot of neurons going on, a lot of synaptic connections, and we're constantly learning from our surroundings and learning from other people. So having that prolonged toxic stress in our lives, your brain cells start to create these like neurochemicals. It's changing your brain chemistry. And so children who come into adolescence, and adolescence is the bulk of our referrals in restorative justice, with a history of adversity are more likely to develop mood disorders, poor executive functioning, and decision-making skills. Is this an excuse for committing crime? No. Should there still be consequences? Yes, absolutely. Should there still be levels of accountability and responsibility? Yes. And that's what we're going to do. However, it is good to know that young people coming into this program with significant trauma history or a high ACE score, that there is actually brain chemistry, it's changing. That the adolescent brain is crazy anyway, right? Like just remember being 16? No thank you. So in fact, if that were to be my brain and then I'm having all this toxic stress, again, is it an excuse to make poor decisions? No, but the brain is actually changed and the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of making decisions, is not working correctly. Why does this matter for restorative justice? 1 in 6 adults experience 4 or more ACEs. That's about 16% of our population. People with an ACE score of 4 or higher are twice as likely to be smokers, 7 times more likely to suffer from alcoholism. They have an increased risk of suicide attempts, more likely to have a lot of other things going on. When we talk about people with an ACE score of 6 or higher, their life expectancy decreases by 20 years. Why does this matter? In the last 6 months, just 6 months, the average ACE score of a youth involved in our program is 5. So, when we talk about the services that we can offer, we're in a really unique position, right? We're in a position where we can provide education, where we can provide intervention. When we look at this specifically as far as smoking, alcoholism, and mental health, we have a lot of services that CADY can help with. when we talk about, you know, the S-Berg, when we're looking at that substance use, we can provide some of the information to hopefully cut down on some of these things. The other thing to think of, you know, if a youth is coming into our program and the charge has to do with substance use, like that's a red flag in general, right? But then when we look at this and we see that, it's really a red flag. Like now is the time, it's a really unique opportunity for early intervention. So one of our interns in the spring was super passionate about this, and she created this flyer because we don't want to be all doom and gloom all the time, right? So when kids go through the ACEs survey, they find this information, like, oh, I'm doomed, great. They're not, right? Because there's neuroplasticity. Your brain can change back. So the brain has the ability to change based on experiences. We focus a lot on adverse childhood experiences, but there are also positive childhood experiences. And so how can we in restorative justice provide some of that to help rewire that brain, to help make better humans, to help make more responsible citizens, active members of our community, resilient youth, to promote that positive behavior change. And so she made this flyer. This was part of her legacy project. We asked our interns to do that. And so this is a flyer that we give after giving the ACEs survey. We hand this to the youth so that when they leave, again, they're not feeling all that doom and gloom.
Do you have that available?
I certainly do. I can send that out, yeah. So all the research is showing us, though, that there is no more effective neurobiological intervention than a safe relationship. And that is what the Restorative Justice Program can offer. Deb said it before, that the kids who come through this program are the lucky ones, right? Because when someone goes to court, they don't get all of these services. So when they come through restorative justice, we do all of these questionnaires, we do all of these surveys, we look at what the needs are, and then we can provide some intervention. And so hopefully, like I said too, my job is to pair youth with people in our community who are going to be positive mentors, which is why Tina has been so remarkable at her job. We had a young person who got into some trouble. They also had been a survivor of sexual assault. And they were mad, they were so angry. I met with this person and they were like very upset. I had to talk them down, right? Did not want to participate, did not want to do community service. We finally got over that. And started to work with Tina, started to work on projects with Voices Against Violence. Started to feel really empowered, actually. And that person has successfully completed our program and is still working with Tina. Hopefully they continue to work, because I think that's very healing. So again, that safe relationship can be a huge, huge help to people. Other protective factors, though, I use this formula, but basically it's just saying that there are protective factors specifically within communities. And so communities where families have access to financial help, mental health care, all of the things like safe and stable housing, we're looking at safer communities. Communities with strong partnerships, which is why I'm so glad you're all here. Communities where residents feel connected to each other, involved in the community, communities where violence is not tolerated, not accepted. So again, ACEs clearly has a pretty big impact on brain chemistry, brain development, behavior. Does not mean that crime's okay, does not mean that breaking the law is okay, but can we intervene and help in any way that we can? Because communities where violence is not tolerated or accepted can be a protective factor. So once we go through all of those questionnaires and all the stuff that we just talked about, we have a reparative panel. And this reparative panel, normally there is the youth, a guardian, myself, hopefully a harmed party or however many people are involved with that. And then 3 trained panel members who get to provide an alternative perspective, like a community member perspective. And I use the transformative conflict model. This is where that misconception that we just talk about our feelings all the time, it actually does happen. We sit around a table, we talk about our thoughts and our feelings. The youth has the opportunity to say what happened, to take responsibility, to take accountability, make some amends. Everyone gets to share their thoughts and feelings. Harmed parties get to talk about what happened, how that made them feel. We talk about those ripples of harm. we look at their needs, and then ultimately it becomes a work session. I like to say that at every panel. This is now a work session. We are going to work through how do you make amends to yourself, how do you make amends to your community, what do you need to do, and the panel members play a huge role in that as well. So the desired outcome, everything we've talked about thus far, right? Again, we end with restoring the youth's place in the community because that's important too. They are part of our community. We're here to support them and to have them reintegrate. But learning the consequences of their crime, building some of those skills is written into the reparative agreement, working together with the panel members to figure out what is that going to look like, how do we move forward, and then ultimately, repairing the harm. So the reparative agreement, it's like an action plan, and this is what they have to do. These are the hoops that we jump through, right? This is what they have to do in order to complete the program. So there's terms. We put normally it's about 3 months that we say they have to complete it, 3 to 6 months. I've been pretty flexible and a lot longer than that, because sometimes kids just stay in the program, which is fine as long as they're actively doing community service. They pay the restitution if they need to. They write letters of apology or appreciation. We set up that the timeline. And this is what a blank reparative agreement looks like. So it's broken down to 3 sections: restoring, making amends with the harmed party, with the community, and then with themselves. And as long as everyone's on board, we put a completion date on it, everyone signs off on it, and that becomes the binding agreement. So if the date comes and they haven't completed it, most of the time, I already know that's going to happen, right? So I'm constantly meeting with the youth, but if there's no effort being made at all, I send it back to the referring agency because they haven't completed. If they haven't completed by the date, but there's still that effort and there's some other things going on, we still work together. So panel members play a really important part, and you'll hear from a few of them at the end. But they are all volunteers. Many of them have been doing this for a very long time. They volunteer their time, their energy, their knowledge. They have great problem-solving skills. They act as positive role models. They really help offer that alternative perspective when identifying ripples of harm, specifically things that the youth have not thought about at all. They're able to provide some of that perspective. They maintain confidentiality. Obviously, everything that we talk about in our reparative panel stays at the reparative panel. And then in the community, they promote the program, which is great. We ask them to be empathetic listeners. And so, all the different techniques to being empathetic, it's really can be scary for the youth when they walk in. And we talk about that in the meetings leading up to the panel. So you're going to walk in, there's going to be 5 or 6 people sitting at this table, and we're going to be staring at you when you walk in. That can be really overwhelming, and I'm sorry about that, right? But giving them that heads up beforehand is super helpful, super beneficial. And really, no one on the panel is scary, I assure you. They're lovely people. And they are all trained in how to do this. And really the goal is to be helpful. So it shouldn't be scary, even though when you walk in, everyone's like, hi, welcome. It looks a little freaky at first. We are practicing effective questioning. So why are we questioning? We're questioning them because we want more information. We want to gather some information about your likes, your dislikes. Where can we place you for community service that's going to make you passionate and feel like you're part of the community? If there are any issues, we're going to find out about them, right? So that's another skill that they have. There's also positive questioning. Positive questioning, those are questions that someone is not afraid to answer. So they're all phrased in a positive way because, again, restorative justice is not about guilt, it's not about blaming, it is about accountability. So, kids aren't coming in and we're waving our fingers at them and making them feel ashamed. That's not what it's about. It's really about making amends. So our panel members are not accusing, they're not being sarcastic, there's not threatening tones, they're not coming down being condescending. It's really a supportive environment. So there is kind of this switch here. On the right is more of that punitive response. That's more of what happened? Okay, you did something bad. Here's the punishment. Not always super effective when we talk about lasting behavior change. We're using fear and punishment more as that deterrent. And then that also alienates a person is the harmed party, right? Because they haven't really been able to say their piece or made their voice heard. The restorative response is more about like, who was harmed and what is needed for repair. How do we make amends? How do we move forward from this? We give them the opportunity to take the accountability, and then again, ultimately, it's about the harmed party and the youth to talk to each other. They're face to face. For the youth who maybe threw a rock at someone's window and they now had to pay $500 to look someone in the eye and say, sorry, that's really hard when you're 13 years old. That's really hard when you're 30 years old, right? So 13 is like to look someone in the eye and really apologize, and then to have the harmed party be able to say what they need to say. It can be a really healing experience. So these are some of the questions. This is really what it looks like, and this is part of when you go through the panel member training. These are the questions that we kind of work through. It's really what happened, what are your thoughts of that, what happened? It's like, okay, you threw this rock, the police showed up, what happened? How did you feel about that? Most of the times the kids go, oops, who's calling my mom? Uh-oh. What have you thought about since then? So that can be really impactful too. And this is for not just the youth, but their families as well. How has this impacted you? Like now all of a sudden mom's getting a phone call from the police. How do you explain that? Or the police are showing up at your house, you have younger siblings. How do you tell your younger siblings what happened? How has it affected you and others, the harmed parties? Sometimes they'll say if it was a home invasion or something, the ripple of harm is like, well, now my daughter has nightmares at night because she thinks someone's going to break into the house. Things that a 14-year-old has not thought of, right? So that's where this panel can really be informative and healing for everybody. So I told you I would show you what a reparative agreement looked like. This is one that we used about a month ago. So this young person needed to write a letter of apology. They needed to pay $12.95 in restitution. And to restore to the community, they needed to do some community service. They did 15 hours of community service at the Science Center. They were trained in spotting invasive plant species, and then they walked the trails and they used like loggers to cut them, which is pretty cool. And they now have the skill, right? And they really enjoyed it. So they're actually still doing community service there with the idea that they want to work there, hopefully next summer, which is pretty cool. They wrote a letter of appreciation to the officer that put them through this program, because that's the other thing that I like to say to the youth is, you didn't have to be here, right? The officer did not have to send you to this program. So they wrote a letter of appreciation. To improve their own skills and competencies, we're going to create a resume, we're going to apply to 3 jobs for the summer, and we're going to practice interviewing. So you better show up in your interview attire, because I'm going to ask you some questions. And then we work on self-care strategies, and this young person really didn't have any club sports ties to the community, was struggling they didn't really have friends in school, hated going to school. And so we thought, well, what if you got involved in some kind of sport or club at school, of your choice, whatever you want to do. And so they said, well, yeah, I guess I played soccer in middle school, I could try in high school too. So the goal was to begin working out a little bit, start that preseason exercise to try to prepare for soccer tryouts. It's happening as we speak. So TBD on what ends up happening with that, but they're there, which is great. That is like huge for them. And so once this was created, we put that end date on there. Everyone signed off on it. They did complete it. So we bring everyone back together for that reparative panel. All the panel members come back, the harmed party comes back, the youth and the guardian come back, and then they are given the coveted certificate. I'm like, great, thank you. So their name goes on it, we sign it, we date it, they talk about all the cool things that they've done or that they've learned. The young person who got to cut the invasive plant species brought me a piece. Actually brought a piece for their mom, and showed what it looked like, so they kept a part of the invasive plant species, which is cool, I guess. And so yeah, they get the certificate of completion, and then that is what I send off to the referring agency. And then once they get it, that's great. I like to stress that this is a second chance, right? Should they get into trouble again, and they won't. But should they get in trouble again, they might not be able to come through our program. So this really is a shot at a clean slate. This is a second chance. And we've had kids come through the program more than once, right? But you've already done it one time. Why would coming through it a second time be beneficial? You have to convince me of that. So this is it. I hand them the certificate. I say, I have enjoyed getting to meet you. I hope I see you again, but I hope I never see you here. And that's really how it ends. So again, we did all of this data since March. So I tried to keep it. I was on maternity leave and then came back. So March is when we started kind of tracking some of this stuff. So since March, kids have completed 84 hours of community service. We've done community service in a lot of different places. We've collected $144 in restitution. Some of the damage in one particular case was about $1,000. That young person was homeless and really unable to pay $1,000. Thankfully, the organization's insurance company paid $500, and then we had 2 separate anonymous donations that equaled the $500. So at that panel, when we told the family that they did not have to worry about that, people were pretty emotional. That was a huge stressor for that family. They were living, 3 kids in a camper in a backyard, and there was just no way they would ever be able to afford that. So that was huge. And they have since bought a home and they've moved. It's a really great story. But yeah, so since March, these are some of the data points that we have. This was an independent evaluation from the Community Health Institute. So I talked a little bit about how we provide that pre and post CADY specific survey. That's where we're measuring our program. Is it effective? Is it working? Is it doing what we're saying that it's doing? And so we ask a couple questions. We ask the youth to fill out a pre and post. We just ask guardians to do a post survey. But when asked about the likelihood, if a young person would likely commit a similar offense, 97% of the youth thought it was unlikely. Good, I'm glad. All parents categorize the impact of restorative justice on their child as either positive or very positive, which is awesome. And then we do have some snippets of things that parents have said about the program. So this slide is looking at, because the survey really does focus a lot on substance use, the red is pre-program data, the yellow is post-program data. And so that's looking at alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, vaping. And so we do see a pretty big jump down in use after the program, which is great. So yeah, pretty exciting. Does anyone have any questions for me before we move forward?
Also, I'm just going to say that once they have their successful completion, the record is expunged. There's no record of conviction, non-conviction, which is really critical compared to, we know that in the past, it's been an issue with scholarships, employment.
The military is one that we just ran into.
And so that's really a real critical aspect, and I think a incentive also for participation.
Yes, so that clean slate, like I said, we really hammer that home because a lot of kids, regardless of whether or not they want to go to college or a trade school or whatever, just to not have something on their record is huge. And like we just had a young person who really wants to join the military and was basically like, I don't have a choice, I have to do this program. And this is going to, the military has been the way that he sees that he can change his life around. He kind of sees that route as being a lifesaver for him. So he was like, I'm doing this program, I'm committed to this program. He completed his community service in a day and a half. So he was very committed. Yeah, he did 10 hours of community service in I think like 48 hours. So
they take that very seriously. We had this was probably about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where the military, they actually came in and they had to review the youth's file to determine that certain educational aspects had been made, and we had to show them this. This was, came down from the federal government, that we had to give them full access to the files, and once they saw that the alcohol education all these other things were completed, they gave go ahead and he was able to enter the military. If not, that would have been it, you know.
In a
What
way
a
that's
loss.
really good though, there are high rates of individuals going into the military with ACEs and having no connection with people, so they have no awareness of, they might be going into the military looking for survival, right? And then there's a lot of trauma that can go in just for fighting for your country, learning how to fight for your country, things that can happen in that environment, and the lack of control they may feel. And so then it can create a lot of more increased depression, aggression, and harm. So it's good in a way that they're looking at it. Hopefully they're doing that for the right reasons so that they can prevent those situations where somebody's not prepared to go into the military and all that it entails.
Yeah, thank you. So we now have a first guest speaker. So this is Dr. Krista Palmer. I mentioned her earlier. She does a lot at Plymouth State, but she also is a valued member of our team, and I've sent some restorative justice kids her way. So, Clarissa, thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. I will tell you that I had a furry friend at home who was very anxious to come with me today, but food. So, didn't want to do that. The scientific exploration of human-animal interactions truly began in 1970s and early 1980s with a little dog named Jingles, who ended up getting an adolescent to start talking to his therapist. And that was the first documented case of human-animal interaction supporting adolescent development in the United States. However, informally, but still very purposefully, human-animal interaction dates back to 1790s in York, England. Now, I hope you don't think that my history goes back that far with animals, but I have had pets my entire life. Everything from dogs to rats to rabbits and now farm animals. So I also worked at a zoo for 9 years as an education specialist and delivered programming to children and adults of all ages, and was able to see firsthand the impact that non-human animals have on us animals. And I really wanted to be able to study that as I went through my academic program. As a developmental psychologist, my job is to help people learn and grow from every experience that they have. And that's what our participation in the Restorative Justice Program allows. The work we do with CADY and the Restorative Justice Program is really a we effort. It takes the RJ coordinator, it takes the youth, it takes their families, and my community partners who are registered pet therapy teams. And that's important. They are registered or certified. They are not people with good hearts who say, here, borrow my pet for a while. These are trained therapeutic intervention professionals who are all volunteers, by the way. So with pet therapy, the animals help us break down walls and barriers to reach the youth and their family members in ways that may not happen with other more traditional interventions. A few examples of how our work with the animal-assisted services have supported some of the RJ teams and youth include a young man, one of the youngest actually, who was acting out seemingly for attention. He was teamed with a golden retriever who was already well trained and, as I said, certified, and her handlers, who were in their 70s. We designed a tricks training program for the young man and the dog to go through. They worked together weekly on these tricks. At the end of the program, the youth wanted to show off his work, remember that attention piece, and really show how he was able to achieve his goals. So he developed an in-person demonstration with the dog and her handlers. He also took it upon himself to invite members of the community to the presentation through his own handwritten invitations. They all showed up. And we have video too, because we did get that release. That was pretty cool. We also recently had a young woman who was completing community service hours at a farm with 2 steer, so male cows, 2 donkeys, and 3 goats. While brushing a steer, the steer's foot grazed the youth's foot. We went back into the barn, sat her down on a bench, probably a bale of hay if I remember correctly, and I proceeded to take off her steeker and her sock to inspect her foot for any injuries. I asked her to wiggle her toes to make sure they were all working, and I started poking her foot, and she proceeded to laugh. Everything was fine with her foot. Her mom looked at me, and this is the most important part. Mom looked at me and said, she never lets anyone do that. And I said, do what? Because I don't let people tickle my feet either. And she said she never lets anyone help her. The sock went on, the shoe went on, we went back out to the yard and finished brushing the steer. It was pretty incredible for me to see how the family gets involved with what we're trying to do here. The work that we do with Animal Assisted Services and the CADY RJ program shows youth and their families that there are people out there that they can trust, that there are people out there that they can count on, and that there are people out there that believe in them. The animals create a space for people to drop their guards, hear insights differently, problem solve in unique ways, explore their interests, learn real life skills, and make connections within their community. Working with animals offer the youth and their families opportunities to realize their own strengths, interests, and abilities that they might not have ever been aware of previously. Animals have a way of speaking to individuals that humans can't. When we have youth connecting with animals and their handlers, we are able to provide experiences that encourage social connections, empathy and understanding, responsibility, self-esteem, and perhaps most importantly, self-awareness. All skills necessary for lasting behavioral changes and supporting positive life choices. And no, I did not see your slideshow before I put this together. While I wish that we lived in a world where the CADY RJ program services were not needed, I am grateful that we have the CADY program and our community partners, including the dogs, steer, donkeys, goats, and rabbit, as well as all of you to help our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarissa. We had another guest speaker, Jessie Maranowski. She works for the National Forest. She actually just got sent up to Idaho to deal with wildfires, so she is not here today. She did send us some audio, but in the interest of time, I think we're going to go right to Mr. Bossy. So this is Mr. Joe Bossy. Come on up, Mr. Joe Bossy.
Kind of ironic, I just came from Idaho from the wildfire. Except I was camping in it. I'm here today to show a perspective from a parent that has come through this program with his son. First off, I want to start by saying I'm absolutely terrified talking in front of people because, not for reasons you would think, I just never tell a story without swearing. I will try to be good. I think my son was probably one of the founding members here because back in June of 2007 is when we were in this program.
He was the second referral we ever received.
Was he really?
Yep, yep.
Thank God. I'm gonna just back up a little bit to show you a little bit about how kids actually get here. Young man in my account. Back in 2005, I went through a divorce that was a little bit nasty. And unfortunately, the kids get wrapped up in that stuff. And I take full responsibility because you get so wrapped up in your own boo-hoos, you don't really see it from the kids' point of view. So I take full responsibility on that end of it, that Joey went down kind of a dark path there for a while. Bounce up to about 2006. Joey was never really great in school, and in 2006, we finally found out as a sophomore in high school that he had a disability in written expression. You could write a word on a piece of paper and ask him to spell it next to it, he would spell it differently. There's just some connection that wasn't there. So even his teachers up in school told him that he would never be anybody, and he really had a rough time of it. 2007, I was at a retirement party for a friend of mine that was retiring from the school, and I got a call from Concord Police Department. My son had just been arrested. He was on the delayed enlistment program to get into the Marine Corps at the time. That dream of his just shot right out the window. It was gone. There was no way you're going to get in the Marines after you just ripped off the store with your friends and insert restorative justice program. It saved his life. This program, it meant so much to me. I actually saved his apology letters. I still have his contract signed. I still have my contract that I signed for him. I was a single parent at the time. And without this program, you just can't even imagine. Punitive punishment just doesn't work for some people. My son especially, because he just doesn't deal well with people telling him this is what you're going to do. And this is your punishment for it. It really helped him to be able to look at what he did, tell people he was sorry for doing it. Part of his restitution, I mean, obviously he gave back the stuff that he stole, and he had to speak to the Penny Baker kids as to why you shouldn't be able to do this stuff. He had to do community service. He had to write apology letters to everybody. I might even finish by reading mine, depending on how much time. He wrote one to me. Mind you, he has a written expression problem, so there's no punctuation, no nothing, so I apologize. But I still would like to read that towards the end of this. I already got through the apology letters. Joe did his 4 years. He got through this program successfully, long story short. He got through his 4 years in the Marines, didn't really care for it. Got out, went into the Army. Joey is still into the Army to this day. Last year he graduated the United States Army Advanced Leadership School as a distinguished honor graduate. He got the Leadership Award. If not for this alternative program, none of this would have been possible. I mean, none of it. This program saved his life. It works. It saved my life because I'm the one that put him in the predicament that he was in, and I didn't deal real well with it. This is a Dear Dad letter that this program back in 2007 made my son write to me. I'll try to get through it without crying. It says, Dear Dad, I feel like I have let you down as a son. Everybody was just starting to treat me like an adult, and what do? I go get arrested. I just feel like all the trust that me and you had was demolished by me showing off in front of my friends. I also feel bad about you having to leave the retirement party to come to get me in Concord. At least he thought about me a little. Nobody should have to leave a retirement party to go get their son out of jail. That is just completely irresponsible on my part, and I deeply apologize from the bottom of my heart. We have been through a lot in the past 2 years, and most of it for the good, and some of it was bad. But all around, it has brought us really close. And we had a lot of trust going, and I feel like that trust was gone in that minute. I had to call you and tell you that I had just got arrested and having to ask you to come get me. That made me feel like a complete, asshole. I knew I wouldn't get through without saying it. And I am sorry for that. Bottom line, I hope that this mistake can be fixed between us, and I deeply apologize for my actions. I hope that we never have to go through this again. And ironically signed it Joseph Gilman Bossy II. There is no way that a parent could be more proud than what I am of that man right there. That said, there is no way that I could be more thankful for a program like the Restorative Justice Program. It works. Please, please support it. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. We have one more guest speaker. This is Rachel. Come on up, Rachel. This was we weren't sure if Rachel was going to make it today, and she's here, and we're so glad that she is. Here you go. You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I went through the program with my son also, my son Lucian. He did come here with me, but he left early. So he got involved with the program in 2020, and he started working with Doug Moorhead, and what they did together, Lucian likes building things, and he built a social distancing candy dispenser for Halloween, and because they had a competition in Bristol, and he actually won first prize. And he was so proud of himself, and it became a family thing too. Myself and his older sibling was part of that night, like working the crane arm that was the candy dispenser. And he was so proud of himself. He built this basically all by himself, of course, with the supervision of Doug, and obviously Doug provided all the resources and tools. And that was just the beginning of the many projects that Lucian would do with his mentors through the program that would really help build his self-esteem, his self-confidence, and it really meant a lot. Yeah, a lot of the activities he did in this program just really built his sense of pride. He worked a lot with Tim Tyler for most of the time that he was involved in the program. And we did quite a few things together. So Lucian and Tim one of the things they would do was throw a football or a frisbee. And was it your heart, Tim, that you had to take it easy with? And Lucian was very aware of Tim's health restrictions, and it gave Lucian a sense of caring for somebody and kind of being responsible with someone else, and being oh, are you okay, we'll take this easy, just kind of like taking care of a friend, and being gentle with them and growing his compassion. Another thing we did was the golf tourney in Lincoln, and that was really fun. That was a really fun community event. And I think actually our team name came from me and Lucian kind of melding our ideas. It was the CADY Kitty Caddies. We thought that was pretty clever because he likes cats, so kitty caddies, but caddy is like golf caddy. We thought that was fun. Yeah, there was a few other things, but the point is just the time he had with the mentors there and the activities they did really helped to build his self-confidence and self-esteem and sense of self, and kind of gave him a little bit of purpose and place in the community, and I think it really helped him a lot, and he would probably be in a lot worse place if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the program. So, thank you.
So I know that we are getting down to our time, so if you do need to leave, feel free. But we do have a Q&A session with some of our panel members. So if we could have Pete Cochran come on up, Carolyn Pantadosi come up, and Sam Richard come on up. You said wherever you like. If you could just introduce yourself and let us know how long you have been volunteering with our program.
I'm Celine Richer, and I've been doing this since 2008. I'm Carolyn Pantadosi, and I've been doing this for probably since 2011.
Close enough.
Tim got me.
I'm obviously Pete Cochran. I've been doing this since probably 2012.
Does anyone have any questions? I have some questions, but does anyone have any questions you would like to ask our panel members?
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Any questions? Yes.
Pete, this one's for you. How can you pretend to get in the head and understand a teenage brain?
So the question was, how can you try to understand and get in a teenage brain? Specifically for Pete.
Act like them. But I've always been involved with youth. I was involved in athletics all my life as a coach, administrator, and whatnot. So I would see the youth in a different angle than oftentimes teachers would, and worked, I think, a pretty good relationship with them, and would be sarcastic at times if I felt that would be beneficial, and would listen to them and let them talk, and then as that reminded me in some of the question things, listen to them and then react in a positive way to what they were saying, and get them to think about what they had said in a different manner. And, oh yeah, that's right, and then just build off what they felt was, thank you, Liz, that's just like when you played third base. Good job. Liz played third base for me many years ago. But I think it's just the relationship I've built with the participants. Obviously, I've always coached girls. Many of the participants did not have a positive male figure in their lives, and knowing that helped me try to just come at life from a different angle, and again, get them to come up with the answers, and not me stand there and tell them what the answers were, but get them to think a little bit about it and then feed off what they said.
Thank you.
Can I just add something to that? I just, like with Lucian, they would really focus on his strengths, like building Legos and just building things with his hands, and when things would come up and he, it would be taken as a learning opportunity, and would kind of go through those avenues to like work on taking accountability and those types of things. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
One of the things in a school setting we have trouble with is the harm party, to try to get them on board. And I don't know what tips there are to try to make sure the harm party knows what's going on, and that this is not, and it goes back to the argument you said before, that it's not, we're not just letting people off, but we're trying to restore it. So I don't know if there's any tips that you guys have to try to get them on board when they're hesitant.
You experienced a harmed party who has not been super on board.
A couple of occasions with me, being an advocate. In one case, the police chief of the town did not want the victim to be involved with the youth because she was accusing them of more than what they really did. So I met with her and she, and asked her, you know, what do you want me to say? What is causing you the most distress? In another advocate position that I took, the parents were the victims and they were still there. And it was very awkward for me to be an advocate when I was advocating for them and yet they were there. And they were very adverse to the whole situation. It was a bit awkward, but we get through it. You have to sympathize. They're the victim, but they're also the parent. So there's so much conflict, there's love, there's angst, they're afraid for their child, but they're angry at their child too. It's very complicated.
I can also speak to some of that because I've been a victim advocate. And in one case, it's not so much I had to pretend, because that's what I had to do, to be a 14-year-old girl who had been sexually, not assaulted, but harassed by a 14-year-old boy. And so that was trying to put myself into a 14-year-old mind, which of course I'm not anywhere near that, but using my own experiences as a woman, as a young woman, and what that felt like. And the impact I had on that young man, I think, in some ways frightened him because he didn't understand. So he understood the harm. The young girl was not allowed to be there because she was too young and they wouldn't allow her. So there was no talking to her. I had to kind of, based on my own experience with my two daughters, although they never went through that, and my own experience as a young woman being harassed, I had to do that. And I think that impacted him and his mother. I think they didn't have any idea what would happen for him, and also how it impacted another human being to put them in that kind of situation.
And I think just tips and tricks on how to get people involved if they don't want to be, using like a harmed party surrogate. So, you know, someone who can just represent the perspective, even if it's not necessarily the harmed party. That has been, like we've had youth who have been caught shoplifting from Walmart. Walmart is a huge company, right? When I call them, they're not sending anyone to come to our panels. So we kind of have to figure it out. So using someone as a surrogate has been really helpful. Tim, did you have something to add?
Well, just about the victim advocate piece, that we had situations where victims didn't want to come forward, but were open to someone coming and meeting with them. And I know we dealt with both Carol and Celine, who did excellent jobs of sitting down with those people, kind of alleviating their fears, representing them, and being effective at the panel to get where we were trying to go.
Any other questions? Yes.
How do you become a panel member?
How do
You're on
well,
now.
Thank you for asking. So I am in the process of doing some, we're gonna do a panel member training coming up. The date is still TBD, but I can certainly push that out. We have done training in the past, but I would love to, you know, kind of get everyone together and go through the training, and that's it. Once you're trained, you do the background check, you sign off on like the confidentiality stuff, and I will call you.
I think I had to pick my feet up, because I think I just stepped in it.
Certainly did. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, Pete, yes.
And one of the things that, to me anyway, is the most rewarding is when the student comes in, it's also, I know, I don't really want to look at my parents and that, and then whomever the directors, Tim, Jim Kemmer. I started back when Jay Appicelli was up here, and yeah, I think we all did actually. And Jane then went on and went to the State Athletic Association, the NHIAA, and had a session there, and I was fortunate at the time to be down in Newfound, and we brought down 4 administrators. But the thing I found the most rewarding was at the closing panel. The kid who was like this was really excited about this, and you know, you had me do this project, and not only did that, but they now want me to work for them part-time on weekends, so you know, I'm getting some money out of this. And another individual had an interest in athletics, and you worked with him, Tim, and he came in the same way, real quiet, a Lincoln student, and was just down and whatnot. And then when he came back for his closing panel, the self-confidence that student then had in himself, obviously, but what he had done, and people saying, "Hey, nice job, you did it," you know, it showed. And I don't know what he's doing now, but those are the things that really, to me anyway, reward our involvement, because when we sit there at the beginning, we don't know anything about the student when they come in until it's explained to us. Some of them are like, "Holy crap, you know, where do I go with this one?" And then we, as you were saying, well, you listen to what the student says, and then we work off what he or she said in asking our questions, because that way the student feels listened to. And oftentimes that's one of their issues, that they don't feel listened to wherever they might be. But it's very rewarding from my perspective.
Thank you. Tim, yes.
I just wanted to make one last statement. Our panel members have been great. I was involved with them for many years. And there's one panel member in particular who does a certain form of questioning. His name's Bob. And he's amazing. I had a youth who came in who had started a paper bag on fire at Fox Park Apartments. And it lit it, and a fire truck came. And I reported, he ended up on RJ. And through the whole thing, the fire chief came in and said, "It cost $300 and something to bring that truck out, and you know, he's got this money he's got to pay." And Bob just sat there and said, "Okay, how long did it take you to light that paper bag on fire?" Gets it in 5 seconds. And he said, "So for 5 seconds, what are you going to deal with now? $350 in restitution, 20 hours of community service, 3 apology letters." And it just gets the point across so clearly. And it's effective because kids making decisions in just a matter of 30 seconds or a minute end up having to commit 3 months or more to make it right.
So, yeah, thank you to everyone. I'm really glad that everyone was able to make it today. I'm glad, thank you to our panel members, to our guest speakers. Deb has just a few closing words, and she was going to remind you about the survey, and we do have some door prizes.
I'd first like to say thank you to Allison for the amazing work that she does in this role. Not everyone can do it effectively. You knock it out of the park, Allison. And to all of our speakers, it's so compelling to hear you share your experiences. And Clarissa, I always love hearing you speak about pet-assisted therapy, because all of these things, all of these people have really, I think, emphasized to us how what we need to do is first we reach, then we teach. And that's, it's all one big process, and it's all of you working with us that have made the difference. So thank you so much. And as Allison says, we always have some door prizes. And if you check in your packet, there should be a sheet that says, "Congratulations, you're a winner." And if you find that, you may come up here. We have.
Check some of the empty ones too.
Check, yeah, if you don't, whoever finds it, you claim it. Okay, there you go. Come on down. Is that just too child? Just too child. Okay. Oh my goodness. Megan, did you get one? Okay. We have a gift card to Marshall's. How's that? Okay, that's great. Congratulations to our winners. Before you leave, I just had one more thing I wanted to, two more things. Please take a moment and complete the evaluation. That's really important to us. That helps inform our next programming. And one more thing. It's a call to action, and many of you have already helped us along the way. Several times a year during the legislative season, we send out action alerts. And these are alerts that, may be on a bill for mental health or on substance misuse. There's some bad bills that come before the legislature. I served 6 years myself, I know, and we want to kill those, right? And the voice, our voice matters. So for the good bills we want passed, the bad bills we want killed, the voice of the electorate really matters. And so the last time we did this, it was in the spring. 500 of you responded, and we know, because we can actually count through the vote of voice how many, and to your representatives and state senators. And those bills were killed. So thank you for that. We will continue to do this this upcoming session. So when we send those out, we truly appreciate you weighing in on those. So thank you very, very much. And we will be hosting a legislative breakfast or luncheon. We haven't decided which in the upcoming session, and you will all receive invitations to that. And I hope to see you there. And have a great few more weeks of summer before the colors change and it gets cold again. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate all of you.